Hello and welcome to Weighted Donuts. I'm Wayne Unger. I'm here with my co-host Craig Stier. Craig, how are you tonight?
I'm fine, Wayne. How are you?
I'm doing good. And I'm happy to have, I don't even want to call him a guest anymore. I think that we can almost say we have, we have an old friend back. Dan Szymborski of ESPN. Hey, Dan, how you doing?
Hey, I'm pretty good, but if I'm a friend rather than a guest, I think you have to be nicer to a guest. The friend accepts you for who you are. A guest you have to be, like, super nice to.
Yeah, Wayne, I think he has to remain a guest.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
don't
friendly
take
guest.
psychological abuse.
Right, a friendly guest.
Okay, so you mean I can't treat you the way I treat Craig?
Yeah. You have to lay down those psychological abuse for another time.
Okay. So just when you dialed in, okay, Craig was telling me how silly he thought the automatic intentional, or I should say the manager just signaling for the intentional walk, how silly he thought it was, and how he felt it wasn't going to speed up the game. And I was just about to tell him that's not an instance of speeding up the game. That's an instance of, picking up the pace of play. So I'm just curious, did you yourself, being just being who you are, when you saw that this was approved, did you dig into your, did you dig in to see how many times there was actually a pitcher threw one away, trying to throw four wide ones?
I haven't actually. It probably doesn't happen really. I mean, it does happen occasionally. There was a college game just a few weeks ago that was decided on a wild intentional walk. It doesn't happen that often, but there just seems something like morally wrong about the whole thing. Like in football, when they take a knee, they still have to take a knee. They can't just declare they're going to take a knee. I think that if you want to walk a batter, that's something you want to do. And if you want to do it, the other team might not want to do it. So in that situation, you should have to execute it, even if it's something simple.
I think
they're not enough that it really changes the game, because intentional walks are really not super common. You see them like every couple of games, but there are just not that many of them in the big picture, so you can't really save much time with it. And since you can't really save much time, if there were like 15 minutes of intentional walks a game or something, then you say, okay, this is a real issue. But I don't see the benefit of it, and it's just if you can't throw four bad pitches to your catcher, then you don't deserve to get your intentional walk.
Dan, I couldn't agree with you more, and it was very eloquently put. And I really like what you had to say. Just because a team wants to do it doesn't mean the other team has to accept it. I think that's a really good point. And unfortunately, I don't think they're going to heed that. I brought this up not as an individual issue. The New York Times had a piece. I don't know if you saw it by any chance in yesterday's paper about baseball just being too slow, and they pretty much went to all their sports writers and said, okay, what would you do? What would you do if you were the commissioner? What would you do to speed things up or to change things and whatnot? And after the fact, the Times has online dozens and dozens of letters written in by baseball fans responding, to that query. What, if anything, needs to be done to baseball? What needs to be fixed in baseball, if anything? And a lot of the stuff, what you've heard time and time again, body armor and the length of some guy came up with the notion of a 7-inning ball game, just 7 innings.
No.
Look, I'm with you on this. Any change to baseball is probably most likely a big mistake. But This one sounded kind of interesting. I actually think it was Harvey Araton of the Times. Said that if you shrunk a game down to 7 innings, and a pitcher would only have to go 4 to get the win, in theory, you could check. You could probably help pitchers' arms out in the long run and whatnot. But the piece itself is very interesting because you've got some really interesting ideas. Again, if you're going to take the step to try to fix something that may not be broken, what could you do to shorten these games and whatnot? So that's how Wayne and I started talking about that. But it's an interesting thought, though, right?
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, if I was going to change something, I do see the argument. It's not that the baseball game is too long. It's that sometimes there's too much dead time between things happening. I tend to try to think less things that impact the actual playing of the game, like, say, intentional walks or 7-inning games, and things kind of around the perimeter, like maybe roster construction. I think that if you had a pitcher cap, for instance, on the roster or something, then you wouldn't see these 13-man bullpens with 6 relievers having to throw 2 innings. I think you can shave off some time there. Because if you look at the difference in time between now and 20 years ago, one of the big differences is there's more relievers per game. Every reliever has to have their warm-up moment, the moment where they come out to talk to the previous one and all that shtick. If teams have to have 10-man or 11-man pitching staffs, I think you'd see more long men, less of these constant little pitching changes, and I think you could cut off a lot more time than you could with an intentional walk.
Yeah, one of the writers opined that the thing to do is to no managers can't come to the mound. There's no mound visits. The catcher can't go out and talk. The guy wrote that in the middle of a basketball game, the coach doesn't come out and talk and whatnot.
Come on, guys.
Yeah, you just play the game. And that, a segue to what you had to say was like the roster's expanding to 40 in September. Wayne, I think we discussed this at one point that
yes,
that's crazy. You can have
they should be
pitchers.
They should be a cap.
The games last so freaking long.
Yeah.
Because you've got this endless supply of bodies.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, you know what?
I think I think there's things they can do.
Yeah, I mean, there was talk. Actually, I know Buck Showalter said this. I think Joe Girardi said it. That you can expand the rosters in September, but cap the available guys to like 27 per game.
You can do that. When they talk about not having the 40-man roster in September, that's not a good option because then teams that are out of it can't be using September productively for some of these players, and I think that would be a negative. But I think if you have roster caps per game, you could get the same kind of effect without being too crazy because changing the roster construction for a game isn't the same thing as changing the game itself. And I think, if you can make changes without changing how the game is actually played, then that's a plus.
Right. Okay. We just wanted to touch base with you on that. So thanks for your input. Wayne,
they don't listen. They don't listen to me, unfortunately.
Well, I think it's very interesting that of all the possible changes, that the intentional walk is something that they honed in on. That just escapes me. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like the experiment to have extra inning games with the runner starting on second base.
Ooh,
anybody asked for this ever?
Yeah. I know, it's crazy.
I tell you, when you think about it, probably the two biggest things is one is cutting back on the bullpens, and the other thing, which they're not going to do because it'll cut back on the revenue, is I think they're up to like 2.5 or 3 minutes now in between innings.
Yeah, and the funny thing. I'm sorry.
So that right away is to me that's huge. The other thing, of course, is The guys always stepping out of the batter's box. Always. I mean, Craig, all right, you used to watch, you watch a lot of Yankee games. The guy that used to drive me nuts was Chuck Knobloch. After every pitch, he would step out of the box and adjust his gloves and his wristbands. Every pitch, step out of the box. Like I used to say, watching him at bat and watching Steve Trashel, I think it was, watching him pitch. Oh my God! Like talk about yeah.
Sorry, I remember Traxel. I mean, I remember when he was an Oriole, and I remember some just brutal games that last forever. I still kind of think that some of the games from 2007 are still going on right now somewhere.
Yeah, he was like a human rain delay. He was terrible. Hargrove, right?
Yeah, Hargrove.
But it's just funny the way baseball is sometimes. They seem to have all these ideas, and the ideas all seem to be things that nobody ever asked for. It's like if you go to a burger place and you don't like their cheeseburgers and you say, hey, they don't taste very good. Could you improve it? And they call you back and say, come try our cheeseburgers. We have peanut butter on them now. And you're like, no, we didn't ask for that at all. Please stop. Don't do that.
Well,
right? How do they
Craig and I were just having a conversation. Craig and I were just having a conversation the other day about, we'll meet for breakfast. And I says, oh, man, there's supposed to be this really good diner in your area. I go, it like gets write-ups all the time. And he goes, I know what you must be talking about the Americano. It's not that good anymore. And basically, he goes, it's like they changed the menu. They went away from basic, where I said, I know just what you're saying. Like, now they like kind of went like fusion. And he goes, exactly. Like, it's like, did you ever see something? Did you ever start reading the menu and you see they give some dish a title and you read it, okay, it's got some chicken, it's got this sauce, a little of this, a little of that. And you read it and it's like, wow, that sounds really good. But it doesn't stop there. And then they add, like 3 or 4 more things and it's like, why? Why did you have to go there? Why just didn't it stop there? It sounded great, just like that. It was like they just looking to be different, as opposed to looking to be good to set you apart from other people, as opposed to just, looking to be different. But anyway.
I think, sorry.
It's okay. No, so go on.
I also think about, when Rob Manfred was talking about getting rid of infield shifts too, briefly talking about that. Like, who's asking for it? I mean,
yeah, that's idiotic.
It's like there's it's like this weird suggestion box that they have outside like a methadone clinic or something, and people are putting in things.
No, it's crazy. It's like, I tend to think like it's like some sort of, I don't know, this generational thing. Manfred is more of a different generation. I guess he's not. I think he's older than I am. But in a million years, I would like. Where's this stuff coming from? Who came up with this notion that the intentional walk is the key to bringing kids back into the ballpark, or getting African American kids playing baseball again? Like what's
that's why they don't play in high school. The intentional walk. They're into basketball, and someone says, "Hey, do you want to play baseball?" Like, no. There's too many intentional walks in that game.
Exactly, it's crazy.
And also like what they try to do. Baseball forgets that, like everything else in life, it's it goes in cycles. So one day the stolen base and small ball will come back. One day,
the conditions,
One day, taking a walk will come back.
What about one day the World Series being played during the day instead of starting at 8:30? Like
that'll never come back. That'll never come back. All right. Now you're like violating the follow the money theory.
And that's why the game can't keep kids watching. I mean, it's idiotic. They're so stupid. They're so
I don't like kids at all. So.
But the bottom line is baseball games shouldn't be starting at 8:30 at night. It's wrong. It just is.
You know, if they played the World Series games during the day, I would always schedule one of my week's vacations during that week.
Well, maybe Dan,
without a doubt.
maybe you're too young, Dan. But when I was a kid, you pretended to be sick so you could watch the World Series games that weren't on a weekend. I mean,
I always pretend to be sick. I weaseled out of so much school as a kid, and my parents pretty much let me because I did very well at tests and everything, and I wasn't really doing much. Like once I was bit by a spider, and I took a little bit of red poster paint and I put it over where the spider bite was, and then I took some nail polish remover and like diluted it so it looked like my leg was swollen, like an allergic reaction, and I scored a day off of school for that. And my mom figured it out, but I didn't get in trouble. She was very pleased that I was so clever.
Wow.
That's a cool mom.
She was proud of it. She's like, wow, that was really good. I was fooled. I'm like, yep.
Well, now, at what age did you actually start cutting out of school?
Oh, I actually came and go pretty much as I wanted. My grandfather, he was a very forceful man. Like, he was a government lawyer. He was involved in government for a long time. Army guy. And nobody was allowed to go off campus for lunch, except for me, because he called the school and he informed them that I would be leaving to get lunch if I so chose. So I'd just leave, and sometimes I wouldn't come back.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't get away with stuff like that, but I took things into my own hands at I'd say, once I started hitting about 7th or 8th grade, I took things into my own hands. So there you have it.
Baseball.
So yes, back to baseball. So tell me something, Dan. Are you how are your projections coming along?
Well, I've done all the players. I'm working on the teams, because they do big simulations and stuff for ESPN magazine, which I do every year, which is always fun because they give me like a lot of space to do all that. It shows off my work, which is cool because people don't read magazines like they used to, but it's still cool to be like on the newsstand and open it up and see your name. I still get a kick out of that. Plus I get paid for that, which is also nice.
I want you to know that I actually do subscribe to ESPN magazine, but I do it because I get I get like those bargain subscriptions, like for $8 a year on the internet.
Oh yeah, I give people those. We're allowed to actually.
Okay, and by doing that, then I'm automatically an insider instead of paying them $40 a year to be an insider.
Before I even started working with ESPN, I had an insider account, and every year for a couple years, this was like 2007, 2008, Amazon around Christmas would have ESPN magazine subscription extensions for $1 a year. So for a couple years, I would add the maximum of 3 years. I'd look for deals during the year. And so even before I worked for ESPN, my subscription ran through 2026 for like $40 total.
Very funny.
And every year I kind of have to call them because it kind of messes up their system that someone has a subscription to 2026. I have to call them like, no, it's just me again. I need to reset it for another year.
That's good.
Yeah, no, you always actually have to do that because I stay ahead. I don't stay 10 years ahead, but I stay a year or two ahead, and I always have to at some point I can't get in.
Yeah, whenever you see it, extend it.
We don't want to ruin anything that hasn't been published yet or anything, but so tell us a little bit about what's going on in your mind and in your numbers.
Well, on a very general basis, this is a year that Zips doesn't see a lot of change from year to year because if you look at baseball as a whole, the teams that are in win now mode and the teams that are clearly rebuilding there's a very large group that is either definitely in one camp or definitely in the other camp. I mean, there's some teams that are kind of in the middle, like I guess the Marlins, and I guess the Royals to an extent. But you have a lot of really good teams that just keep pushing, you know, Dodgers, Cubs, Nationals, Red Sox, Indians. And you have a lot of rebuilding teams that are still rebuilding. Atlanta's not really done rebuilding. Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, San Diego. So it's a season that it looks like there's going to be fewer changes year to year than in a typical season, simply because there's such a larger, just a gulf than usual.
Okay, let me ask you a question. I'll run off some teams, and just tell me if you think they're closer to win now or closer to rebuilding. These are teams that, you know, I guess in my mind they're not really win now, but I think they're at least 500 teams. So let's start with our favorite team, the Yankees.
Well, the Yankees, I mean, they had like a little mini rebuild, of course, last year, you know, the little mini one at the end of the summer, which was a really good one. I don't think we're ever really going to see a true Yankee rebuild. They still can contend. I mean, there's still questions about the rotation, which really weren't answered that effectively. I don't see them as one of the top tier wild card contenders, but they're still contending.
Okay, what about the Pirates? I mean, I don't think they're in rebuild mode, but would you still put them like in win now mode? Are they you know, or are they like second tier, you know, as far as winning teams go?
They're probably in the second tier, but they're not really that close to rebuilding. I think they're going to try to do a little as they go. I think that if they were going to retool a little more, you would have seen Andrew McCutchen shopped more heavily this winter, and Meadows brought up. But they do have some expectations to have better pitching than they had last year. Ivan Nova was really good in Pittsburgh. I mean, 52 strikeouts against what, like, was it 4 walks? But I don't remember the exact number, but it was ridiculous. I mean, they had Taillon for a whole year, and they have prospects. They're not going to have Ryan Vogelsong out there throwing 82 innings. They're not going to have Francisco Liriano on the team anymore, having that awful half a season he had. They're not going to have Jeff Locke on the team. He's with the Marlins now. So I think that their pitching will be improved, and it's not good enough to catch the Cubs, obviously. A lot would have to go right for them and wrong for the Cubs, but they are one of the serious wild card contenders.
Where do you see Detroit?
Detroit, they keep kind of hanging on. You keep thinking their window is going to close. I do think that they're kind of running out of time in a sense, just because so much of their core is on the wrong side of the aging curve. They've kind of pushed the disaster day a little forward with some of their trades in 2015, because having Michael Fulmer on the team was a big deal. And, you know, they have Matt Boyd and Dan Norris, so that's forestalled that dark day. But I still think the Tigers are more likely going to hit a rebuilding cycle in the next few years, especially with Mike Ilitch gone, rather than being a top contender.
And I mean, I consider them in the upper tier. What do you think of Houston this year?
Houston's a really good team. They're going for it now. I mean, you look at their signings. There's a lot of short-term signings in there that are essentially slight overpays to moderate overpays to try to have less of a downside and less of a floor. I think they're the AL West favorite. The Rangers, I think, will be better than some of the more skeptical people think, simply because they don't have the same roster they started last year with. But I think the Astros are the favorite in the AL West. I just think the Red Sox are probably the AL favorite. Probably, I'd have to reevaluate it once we know more about David Price.
Okay, yeah. I believe, was it last week or was it the week before? I think it was last week, Craig. We made some picks, and I picked Houston. But I picked them the year before too. So I picked them last year. I picked them last year actually to beat the Cubs in the World Series last year. So, you know, Las Vegas would have laughed at me. So
I actually got the Cubs right last year. Woohoo! Although everybody else did, but still.
That was some.
But did you have the Indians in the World Series last year?
No, I had them winning the AL Central. I did not have them in the World Series.
Who did you have?
Okay, who did you? Yeah.
Actually, I'm trying to remember who did I have in the AL. I think it was Boston. I'm not really positive. I would actually have to check that. I think I picked Boston before. No, did I, or did I pick Houston? I might have picked Houston. See, now I'm getting on my browser and I'm checking ESPN panel picks 2016 MLB.
While you do that, I want to ask a question. How serious do you think this David Price thing is? It sounds.
He has that second opinion, and that is really, really scary.
Yeah.
Because that means the first opinion wasn't what he wanted to hear. Because if the first opinion was good news, he wasn't going to get a second opinion. And Jim Andrews is like the Grim Reaper. Once you see him, something bad's happening.
Yeah, I mean, an elbow, that's very scary.
I did pick the Astros. It was Cubs over Astros I picked.
Okay, so you know what? Even though I was wrong, the fact that you picked them as well, I feel vindicated.
Yeah, well, a lot of the analysts. I'm looking at our ESPN panel, and a lot of people picked the Astros. Aaron Boone, Jim Bowden, Tristan Cockcroft, Andrew Marchand, Eddie Matz, Adam Rubin, Mark Saxon, and Steve Wolf all picked the Astros.
Yeah, who would have guessed Keuchel would have had such a mediocre year and whatnot? My God.
Yeah, that was disappointing.
Well, you know, McCullers got hurt. I think everybody was expecting more from Carlos Correa. So, you know, yeah, there were a number of things. I mean, George Springer didn't have a terrible year. At least he stayed healthy. But I think people were, you know, myself included, were looking for a bigger leap forward from him.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
you know,
I think people probably overrate what his upside is. He's a really good player right now, and he's never going to be a big contact guy. I think he's about where he's going to be, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's a really excellent player. But I hope people don't get too disappointed about that. Tony Bongino, he did pick the Indians to win the AL, but he got the NL wrong. He picked the Giants.
Well, it was the even year, right? So.
Yeah, but that didn't happen. The Brett Saberhagen win thing has been broken.
All right.
Well, hey, one more thing. While we're on the Astros, what do your projections look like for Alex Bregman?
Oh, Bregman got. I don't have it offhand. What I can is I'm slowly opening up the projections while I talk. I'm filibustering while I get Bregman's projection. Zips really likes Bregman. It has him in a full season, 266, 327 on base percentage, 448 slugging percentage, 18 home runs, plus defense at third. That's 3.5 WAR right there. That's a really good projection.
Okay, and
not going to see that good for young players that often.
All right. Well, let me ask you something. I think I asked you this last year. You know, like once you put all the numbers in, you know, were there any like results that surprised you?
There usually are. I try not to focus too much on them, simply because then I start to be self-conscious about them when I go into a season. Then I start thinking, am I rooting for a player to beat his projection that I think so I look smart? So I try not to really take too much note of the projections relative to where I think. One of those years I should just sit there and do that and just bite the bullet, but I'm not. I'd have to really think about it. I'm not actually prepared to answer that at this juncture. If we're talking about the season, though, I'll think about it.
Okay.
I might write a piece on it. I sometimes do. We'll see.
Okay.
And
In the last week, go ahead, Craig.
I just wanted to ask. I know we were in the American League West there for a second. Seattle seems to be on some level everyone's darlings, preseason darlings. Give us a couple minutes on them.
Well, they are. They do. The Astros aren't so good that they're not in a Cubs-like position where they're likely to dominate the division. Even though the Astros are the favorite, both the Mariners and the Rangers have realistic hopes. I think the Mariners are one of the good wild card contenders. Generally speaking, most of their trades help the team to a degree in 2017, except for the Giovanni Gallardo swap, which doesn't make much sense since I've seen Giovanni Gallardo pitch. But other than that, I do think they shored up some of their problem spots in the offseason. I really like Jared Dyson in center field. I think they're a good team. They're not a great team. I kind of see them finishing about where they finished last year, 85, 86 wins, somewhere around there, which makes them a serious wild card contender. And if things go right, that's an AL West contender because they'll win 4 or 5 games more than that if they have some breaks go their way.
And by what date this season do you think Mike Trout's going to walk into the GM's office and say, "Get me out of here"?
I don't think it'll happen this year. Trout seems to be pretty easygoing about that. But we'll see as he gets closer to what would be his free agency years if he starts to get a little jumpy about it. Because the Angels might actually be better this year. I don't think they're a good team, but they had a lot of pitcher injuries, and just having a little better luck on that front would really improve their outlook a bit. I still think it's essentially a 70-win team that has Mike Trout, which makes them about an 80-win team, as absurd as that is because, Mike Trout. I don't think it's going to be a major problem unless the Angels stop making noises about competing.
Gotcha. Are you? I might be crazy, but I was doing my due diligence for today, and for our meeting tonight, and I think the Dodgers look really good. Am I crazy?
Oh no, the Steamer projections that Fangraphs does, Jared Cross does. While Zips has the Cubs as the best team, Steamer has the Dodgers as the best team. If you look at the 2017 projected standings on Fangraphs, they actually list. Well, they did. Now they're a game behind. But as of a couple days ago, they had the Dodgers 2 wins ahead of the Cubs. They've probably done some reshifting with some new data. But it's a really good team. I think Zips is going to have them as the second or third best team in baseball, probably the second best team. It's a good team. They have better depth than they had last year because people forget how many pitching injuries they had last year. They lost most of the rotation to one point or another during the season, and it still didn't destroy them in any way. They were still a really good team. They're not a juggernaut, but I think they have really good depth and can survive some of these problems that teams will have during the season. It's a really good team. They're dangerous, and they can take the Cubs in a 5-game or 7-game series just without that much of a problem because they're fairly evenly matched.
Right.
Speaking of the Dodgers, which direction do you think Yasiel Puig is going in?
I'm going to choose to be optimistic simply because it's in his interest. I know that a lot of guys don't do what's in their interest. But I think the team has given him a lot of rope, and hopefully, because reportedly his demotion to the minors, he was better behaved after that. Because when he was a rookie, his first year in the majors, it was easier to forgive him being a little bit of a problem, simply because he was a very young kid, suddenly a super wealthy guy after coming over from Cuba, but now he's a little older. He's 26 now. It's time to just shut up and do your job. But I'm cautiously optimistic.
I think he's going to have a great year. I think
he has the talent. He's such a talented player.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And here, Dan, you might be able to identify this. He is the first guy that I can recall that I hung on to for 2 years in a row. Okay, or I should say a second year in a row after a bad season. In other words, I hung on to him last year, expecting the rebound, and I didn't get the rebound. Normally, in every case, I can't remember any time after I hung on to a guy and he disappointed me. I kept him on my Diamond Mine team, but I hung on to him again. So and I think a lot also had to do with with his hamstring. I mean, I don't know if you ever had a hamstring injury. I've only had one once, and I didn't get it till I was well into my 40s, if I remember correctly, and I couldn't believe how bad it was. Like when I first did it, I could barely walk. I mean, it's just like guys had, we were playing softball. Guys had to help me to my car, and it's just amazing. Like I went to work with it every day. I was able to walk, but I had to wrap it up every day. And I remember after 2 weeks, I looked at I see the back of my leg. It was black. It was like there was an explosion inside my leg. It was like the back of my leg was black. So, hopefully all that talk about him, loosening up, stretching, and losing some weight will alleviate the reoccurring hamstring injury. I think that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, the Dodgers can compete if he's not good, but it's a lot easier if he is good. Because, I mean, again, a guy with so much talent, I love baseball, so I just want to root for him. So we'll see. I mean, we'll find out.
And your Orioles, what do you got to say about your Orioles?
I still kind of think they're about a 500 team because there's just so many questions around the pitching. Every year it gets a little harder for them to cobble together that rotation. I mean, already Chris Tillman injury concerns, which leaves him Kevin Gausman, and Dylan Bundy, he's never been through a whole season. And they need all three to be healthy to really have a good shot because the back of the rotation, no matter who they pick, it's going to be pretty lousy. And they're probably not going to score as many runs as they did last year. And even last year, they were only middle of the pack in runs scored. People act like, because, I mean, they hit so many home runs. They hit, 255 or something? But they hit so many home runs last year. We're like, that's a crazy offense. But they're only seventh in the league in runs because they don't do a lot besides hit home runs. So I think as a team, I think they're likely to be around 500, which arguably is probably the worst place for the Orioles to be. Because if they're disappointing, it's in their interest to be really, really disappointing. Because only in that situation would they ever get value for, Machado and Britton and so on and so forth. You saw the Orioles from essentially the decade after 1998. They just kind of tried to hang around 500, and the organization never got anywhere. So that's their big danger in a 500 season if they start to get into that trap where they just hover around 500 forever.
And what about Machado? Do you see him playing a lot of games at short again this year, or only if
probably not with an injury? Every year I think, they were lucky last year because of a Hardy injury, and so they had him at shortstop. But the team has just been so uninterested in playing him there, and it just makes me so mad that they've just been so just blasé about it. Because they could have used Hardy as like a super sub at some point. Machado at short, got a power hitting third baseman at some point in recent seasons, and that'd be a crazy good infield. But it's water under the bridge at this point.
Yes. So, Craig, I don't want to keep hogging the time. So go ahead.
Oh no, I wasn't thinking anything in particular.
Okay. So, based on, have you been watching any spring training games?
I'm watching a little. I don't really have much of an impression of things yet, because spring training is, it's spring training.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I tell people don't forget, first couple of weeks of spring training, they're just
getting started. They're just going.
Yes,
and it's really big this year.
Yes, and that's the other thing. Now you'll see a lot more kids getting some playing time because a lot of the veterans have taken off. So, in the Yankee camp, we'll see more of Torres at short. I can't even, off the top of my head, I don't even know.
It'll be a general thing from team to team that you'll see some of that, and I think it's good. I tend to believe that you want to get your starters in shape, but other than that, you want to be playing some of the guys that you're not sure about as much as you can. Use spring training to find out something. I mean, the Angels and Mike Trout. I mean, get Mike Trout in baseball season shape, but you don't have to play him every game or even 3/4 of the games. See what else you have in the organization. See if you have something that isn't terrible. Experiment. I think one of my favorite experiments was the Cardinals bringing Jordan Schaefer to pitch and play outfield because, he tinkered with that last year. And I like when they use spring training for these kind of cool things that might help the team, those lottery tickets, so to speak.
Now you're heading down to Florida, and how long
I'm heading down next
there?
Week.
And
just for like 6 days.
And what teams are you going to be hitting?
Well, I'm gonna I'm gonna probably hit up mostly the west coast of Florida, which is Yankees, Phillies, Blue Jays, Pirates, Orioles. Maybe get over to Lakeland, see the Tigers. But we'll see what I'm up to. I do have I have credentials, so it's pretty easy to get in and out whenever I feel like.
That's great.
Now, by the way, I forgot to ask you, speaking, going back to the teams again, do you think that this will be the year that the young Met pitching, lives up to expectations and, all of them, not just one here and one there?
I really hope so, but what I've learned over the years is don't get overexcited about the health of pitchers. Because really the question for these pitchers isn't talent or their ability, it's their health. If the problem was they just hadn't connected everything yet, they just hadn't fully adjusted to the majors, I'd say, oh sure, this will be the year it'll happen. But when so much of it is injury, pitchers will break your heart a lot with injury. So I don't want to count any chickens until they hatch.
Okay. Now you've done a couple of pieces. Well, one hit today. The other was I think about 4 or 5 days ago. Best contracts, worst contracts. So end of the 2018 season. Let's just say Bryce Harper plays more like Bryce Harper MVP as opposed to Bryce Harper, disappointment. And even though for Bryce Harper, a disappointment. There's a lot of ball players that would have, would trade for his to see, what are considered disappointing seasons for him. So at the end of the 2018 season, Bryce Harper signs a 10-year, $400 million deal. Is that more likely to go on the best contract list or the worst contract list?
Well, it's more likely to go on the worst contract list just because of the amount of money involved. It really depends on where he is going into free agency, both for the amount he actually gets and what the outlook is. But what's on the good side for Harper, and really for Trout and Machado, is that they're going to be on the young side for free agents. And pundits tend to not realize what a big deal it is when a player hits free agency at 24, 25, or 26 rather than 30, 31, 32. It makes a huge difference with how the projections work and what actually happens. I think the best example is the A-Rod contract. People acted like that first contract was like the worst thing in the history of the world But Zips, when I go back, I didn't have Zips until a couple years later, but once you go back in time with it, it would have projected him to be worth $252 million from 2001 to 2010, which is essentially what he got, simply because he was so young, so the risk was less. That the Rangers didn't work out was mostly due to a lot of the other Rangers decisions. They actually, that first year, everyone was blaming A-Rod for the team stinking. They spent $82 million on non-A-Rod salaries, more than any other team in the division. So it's like they already started out with the big payroll and got A-Rod for free, if you look at it that way. So it wasn't A-Rod's fault. But in A-Rod, he didn't quite meet up the contract from a WAR standpoint, but he was actually pretty close. It was something like 3 or 4 wins short of his contract if he had gone for the whole stretch from 2001 to 2010. But what was terrible was the second contract, because rather than locking up his prime and having the end of his contract be like age 33, 34, it locked up all his declining years. And obviously, through next year, instead of paying him to 34 or whatever age it was, 35, it paid him through age 41. And that's a huge deal. And that's why the A-Rod contract was almost doomed to be a problem at the end. And it's the same reason that the Albert Pujols contract was never going to work out, and why, as good as he is, the Miguel Cabrera contract will likely not work out. So for Harper and Machado and Trout, it's not as dangerous simply because of their ages. That was a long answer.
So, yeah, it was. All right, but I tell you what. Give me, if you could, off the top of your head, give me a number for Trout, Machado, Harper. And of course, like I said, we're going to base Harper on having better seasons as opposed to a season like last year. Give me a number where you think on a 10-year contract, it's a break even. It's, like similar to the A-Rod's first contract.
Okay, well, running absolutely no numbers, I would guess that it would be somewhere around like $320 million for Harper, maybe $340 million for Machado, over $400 million for Trout probably, just because he's so ridiculous. I mean, 8 or 9 wins a year is a lot. When you look at a team's payroll to get 9 wins from one player, it's absolutely absurd. It could be even higher than that. Trout's one of those guys who, breaks everything.
Now, do you think...
We talk about, for example, we talk about like a Mike Trout trade, but then you think, what team actually has enough to trade for Mike Trout, even if they wanted to? And then you think, how much is it worth? But it requires so much just to get fair value in a trade you look what they gave the great Chris Sale. Like, Trout, they just to give everybody away. And then you think about the money, it's like, okay, he's worth it, but how many teams are going to give 20% of the team's worth to Trout, essentially? And then you think, wow, it's hard. He might actually be on the best contract list because there's not enough money for anyone to pay him.
Right.
Yeah, I you know what it is? The thing is to, it's like you say, he'll be worth it, but I think like a trade for Trout would not only have to be let's say 4 phenomenal. First of all, it would have to be someone that had a farm system that was really deep. Like if they traded any of their top 4 prospects somewhere else, chances are that prospect would be the number 1 prospect in that other organization's depth chart. Okay, so you got to be talking 3 or 4 prospects like that. And then you also got to be talking about at least 1, all-star caliber major leaguer. I mean, you just can't do something like that. And maybe even 2, you just can't do something like that, just on prospects alone. It's
and you have
too
to,
risky.
And the team that trades for Trout has to be a contender right now. Because they've just traded away their entire farm system for him. So they better be a contender right now. Like, you look at, if you make a list of teams that really could use those 10 wins, I think for a 90-win team, it's not as smart an addition as, say, an 80-win team. You look at the 80-win teams, like Baltimore and maybe Arizona and Miami, and you think, how would they make this trade even happen? Only a few teams have enough to trade for Trout, and they may not want to. Because if you're a great team with a great farm system, which is kind of the condition for trading for Trout, then you're actually the team that least needs Trout. So it's hard not really to see a trade.
Now Trout is Trout also a free agent after the 2018 season?
No, he is, I think, 2021. We were talking. I'm calling it up. He has a contract. I'm just getting the exact figure right now. 2020, he signed for.
Okay. So in
he would
2020, he'll be. Will he be 20? I'm trying to think. Will he be 28 or 29 then?
Well, let's see. Let me see what month he was born in. Okay, he was born in August, so his seasonal age is 1992. So that would be after his 28. He'd be going into his age 29 season.
Age 29. So even with him now, you're talking about a 10-year contract, bringing him through.
Yeah, and that's
age 39.
Yeah, that's a bigger problem. If we're talking about 2018 and 2020, it's a big difference. So we'll see. It might not be a 10-year contract. It might be like it might be an extension to make it like a de facto 10-year contract, because he's making $33 million 2018 through 2020. He's making $33 million a year. So they could probably tack on, say, 7 years at $40 million apiece, and make it kind of because it's weird. Because he's making $33 million already, and he hasn't even hit free agency. There hasn't even bidding for that.
Yeah, that's really remarkable numbers at this point.
But you look at him.
How much higher can he go? How much higher can they go with him?
Yeah, that's
as high as he wants.
Money. Yeah, just get all the money, Mike. It's yours.
It makes you wonder, like,
only 1 year.
It makes you wonder what if they didn't sign him, what his arbitration numbers would be.
I don't think they even have anybody to compare it to. It's like bringing someone in a time machine in like 300 years in the future, and giving them like a cell phone. Like whoa, wait, okay, huh? What's this internet thing? Trout is just so crazy. He's about at 50 WAR. That's where people start talking about Hall of Famers for careers, not just like for peak value. And 2017 is his age 25 season.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
Yeah, he's really remarkable.
It's so good. He makes being remarkable almost boring. You look at the MVP races, and people don't get excited about Trout just because he's so good at being amazing that it becomes almost mundane, legendary. As weird as that sounds.
Okay, so let's take this from a different angle. As amazing as he is, what is I don't know if this is the right word to use with him, but for lack of a better word, what is the weakest part of Mike Trout's game?
His pitching.
Yeah.
Okay.
He can't get the intentional walk done properly.
Yeah, people keep walking him. He's not hitting those intentional walk pitches.
He has no there isn't a weakness in his game. There isn't.
I like I say, I was just, I'm just trying to twist it around and see if, there is no weakness.
He once led the league in strikeouts, but the thing is, when you're slugging like he does, you're incentivized to swing a lot because there's such a high payoff. But it's hard to call that a weakness. He doesn't have a weakness.
And actually, I believe that was the year where he was having a lot of difficulty with the high strike, and you know, but he adjusted to it, and everyone paid. So
yeah, that was the year he was only worth 8 WAR.
Yeah, I should have traded him then.
I mean, they're video game numbers. I mean, the worst you can say about him is that he's a good center fielder, not like a crazy good one. He's not like Kevin Kiermaier in center. He's just merely a very good center fielder who hits like crazy.
Wow, that's a really nasty. That's a really nasty thing to say about him, you know.
He's only very good at something. That's like blood libel. Mike, you're only very good at something, and he like breaks like Rumpelstiltskin.
And okay, what about what about Manny Machado? If we same question about him? What do you think is you know?
I think 300 million.
What I know, but what do you think about as far as his game? As far as his game goes, so like, what would you say? You know, what is he only very good at?
Well, he's not as quick as he was when he was coming up. His base running, he's obviously, for obvious reasons, he's not as aggressive as he was because he's had some injury issues there. But he's not a super fast player, really. I don't think he's ever going to really steal 20 bases again. He's not super fast, but he's a very well-rounded player as well. So these are just relative weekends. There's nothing that Machado is bad at. I mean, maybe he doesn't have crazy good plate discipline like some of the superstars of hitting. But he's such a great defender at third. He's probably a good defender at short if given like full time, because he was good at short in his stint there. It's hard to find like a real glaring flaw in his game.
He'll look so good in pinstripes.
No.
And all right, and what about and all right, what for same question for Bryce Harper.
Well, that's kind of tricky because he did have a down year, and that does affect his value. He's never going to have the same kind of defensive value that Machado has or Trout has. I think the biggest question about Harper is not really one aspect of his game in particular. It's just how good is he? We've seen one season where he was amazing, but we've seen other seasons where he's just very good. So I think that's the big question: is kind of the magnitude of his abilities. Is he a superstar, or is he just a regular star, like the Sun?
Good answer. Well, gentlemen, we've reached that portion of the evening where we bid adieu. And Dan, thank you once again for coming on. We really appreciate your accessibility.
You're our favorite guest.
That was always fun, guys.
And listen, by the way, it was like 90 degrees in Florida today, so make sure you pack sunscreen. Actually, if you're taking a carry-on bag.
White. I have to, if I'm in the sun for like 5 minutes, I start to burn. So there's no chance I won't have sunscreen.
Okay.
Because, I mean, you've seen me. I'm very, very pale.
You and me both.
I work outside or anything.
You don't tan, you stroke.
Yeah. I stroke and, no, really, I will burn. 2 days later, all my skin peels off and then I'm white again. And then I burn again, and 2 days later, all my skin will peel off.
Well, enjoy your stay down there, and we look forward to talking to you at some point once the season starts.
It's always fun, guys. We'll have the season will start, and we'll have some bigger news then, I'm sure.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dan. You have a great night.
You guys have a good one, too. I'll see you later.
Safe travels.
So, Craig.
Good show. Hope everybody enjoyed that. Dan is one of the most erudite baseball minds going. You guys can read him on ESPN the magazine and also online ESPN.com.
ESPN.com. Yes. And as we were talking, I believe you need Insider to read Dan's full columns. Like I say, just hunt around for a cheap ESPN magazine subscription, and you'll save yourself, a good $30 or more. And, it's well worth it because not only do you get Dan, you get Buster Olney, Jason Stark, and there are others. I mean, and by the way, ESPN is not a sponsor. I just giving my opinion. So, Craig, it's time for you to take us out.
All right. Well, we're glad you're all listening out there, and tune in again next week. Not sure who we'll be speaking with, but I know it'll be someone terrific. And as Donald Trump would say, it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be fantastic. Wayne, have a great week. We'll check in with you guys next week, all right?
All right. Same to you, Craig. Have a good night.